All right, we are live. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Faraz Siddiqui. I'm here with Zach Rizzuto. We are going to go over a bunch of things today. There's a bunch of news, talking about some injuries and all of that. Also, Thursday night football tonight. Week 4 has begun, or it's about to begin tonight. Thursday night football preview, and then we're going to go into our quarterback rankings and our running back rankings to kind of get you kicked off going into week 4. Zach, what's up, man? This is going to be, I think this might be a pretty good game tonight.
Yeah, it should be. Now that, we know Tua is playing now. I just got an alert half an hour ago that Tua is playing. So this will be a good matchup, I think. As long as there's no backup quarterbacks playing, we'll be fine. We got enough of that.
As long as there's no Teddy. As long as there's no Teddy tonight, I think we'll be good.
Yeah, no, this should be a good game. I mean, hopefully the Bengals show up and look like the Bengals and not like the first 2 weeks Bengals. The Bengals looked all right last week because they were playing the Jets. Not a slight at your Jets, but
hey man, you can slap my Jets. I'm cool with it. I'm over it now. Like I'm numb. Like if someone makes fun of the Jets at this point, I'm numb.
Right, but they're playing the Bengals. The Bengals are playing the Dolphins now. Dolphins should be a good test to see if the Bengals are actually not going to have a hangover.
I hear that. All right. Well, before we get into a full Thursday night football preview, let's go over some news and notes. First, Bucs head coach Todd Bowles, he said he expects Julio Jones to return this week against the Chiefs. He got a limited practice in on Wednesday. My guess is he'll be limited all week long, and then he might play. He's a bit of a risky start this week. Like, we've seen over the past couple of years, like he'll play and then he'll get hurt, and he'll play and he'll get hurt. So, I'd probably list him as like a wide receiver 3, like a low-end wide receiver 3 flex play with upside, right? That's kind of how I'm dealing with him if he does end up suiting up this week.
Yeah.
Chris Godwin, he's also back in practice. He got a limited session in on Wednesday. That's good news. I don't think he ends up playing this week, just because I think they give him an extra week of rest. This doesn't really line up with the initial timeline. But if whenever he does suit up, like if he does suit up this week, I'd be willing to throw him in my lineup. But if he ends up suiting up, it would probably be like a wide receiver 3 play for me, not the normal, wide receiver 2 that he normally is. Just because I might have like good options that I don't want to bench, to risk Godwin like re-aggravate that hamstring.
Yeah, and I don't think the Buccaneers have to rush anyone back. I don't think you have to rush them back into your lineups either. I'd give them the time to get fully healthy. And like we've said in a couple episodes already, the Buccaneers offense is still in a bit of a funk. The receivers should help them get out of that, but it might take a week or 2 to kind of get back to the swing of things the normal way we usually see the Buccaneers offense. So don't rush them back in your lineups, like you said, especially if, like Faraz said, you have someone that's been performing pretty well for you already on your roster that you don't want to bench. Just ride the hot hand, and then you can make a decision maybe next week when they're more healthy.
Right, exactly. Dalton Schultz, he got a limited practice in as well on Wednesday. That's a solid sign that he could potentially make it back this week. He was inactive on when did they play? On Monday night, right? Monday night against the Giants. I'd play him. Like if he's playing, I'll play him as like a low end tight end 1. Given the a tight end landscape right now. Hopefully he gets some targets from Cooper Rush. Jonathan Taylor, he was listed with a toe injury. He didn't practice on Wednesday, but Tom Pelissero is reported that he is good to go and he will play this week. Now, Christian McCaffrey, on the other hand, he didn't practice on Wednesday with a quad injury, and Matt Rule didn't commit to say whether he would be available for this week. So that's something to keep an eye on. If he doesn't practice on Thursday, I'd pick up Chuba Hubbard. I think I'll pick him up over Deontay Foreman if you need a replacement at your running back spot.
Yeah,
that's going to be an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, it is. We've had a bunch of these like pop-up injury report appearances by Christian McCaffrey just for different varying injuries, and they haven't affected him so far. But this one, Matt Rule is actually talking about maybe not being available this week. We need to heed that warning, and it sucks because now it's happening. He made it through 3 weeks, and now we'll see how week 4 goes. It doesn't seem like it's anything major, so I'm not too worried about it. But his production hasn't been to the point where it's like, you have to like. I'm not saying that you don't start Christian McCaffrey, but it hasn't been the Christian McCaffrey that we've come to know and love. Has he gotten in the end zone yet? He got in the end zone, I think, week 1.
In week 1, he got into the end zone.
And then it's been relatively quiet. He did have 100 yards rushing, though, last week. But he hasn't had the production that we've seen and we've come to enjoy. And now that he's going to be injured, it's interesting to see how people might handle the situation.
Yeah. Hopefully he's good to go.
Yeah.
None of the running backs that we were talking about this week injury wise, they didn't practice on Wednesday. David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, Dalvin Cook. I think Cook he could suit up this week. The other two, though, not looking as good. We'll see what happens on Thursday in that practice. But just keep an eye out on practice reports there. Yeah, that's it. So let's get into our Thursday night football preview.
Yeah,
it looks like both Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Waddle, like you mentioned earlier, will be good to go tonight, according to Tom Pelissero. It is a Thursday night, right? So it's like, oh man, do I really want to start my guys? But it can be a back and forth type of game between two good offenses. So both Tua and Joe Burrow are good plays this week, despite Tua's injury. Waddle's groin injury was a little concerning, but he's in my lineup, right? Like he's going to play tonight. That means it's not serious. So he's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's a leading receiver on the year in terms of receiving yards. I think so. I think so.
But with Jalen Waddle,
regardless.
Yeah, he's in your lineup if he's starting, regardless. It doesn't matter. And the fact that he's starting, and it's on a short week tells you that it's not serious. It's one thing if he's playing on Sunday after injuring it on Sunday, but he's not playing on Thursday, injuring on Sunday. I don't think this should be a problem moving forward, assuming he doesn't re-aggravate anything.
While you were talking about that, I was just looking at the receiving yard. Stephon Diggs is number 1 with 344 yards, and Jalen Waddle is number 2 with 342 yards. So he's off that
That's quite
number
a
1 mark by 2 yards. All right. So what else? Let's see. Joe Mixon, he's good to go, right? He had that slight tweak of his ankle in last week's game, but he's off the injury report for tonight. Still, if you're in a league where you can drop bench players after Thursday night and pick up another player for Sunday, pick up Samaje Perine if you have the bench spot. I do this for any Thursday night game, allows it. If Mixon gets hurt, you just saved a bunch of fab dollars because Perine's already on your bench. The thing is, there's not that many handcuffs where you could kind of grab them before Thursday night because they're mostly rostered, right? If the Bucks were playing on Thursday night, Rachaad White, mostly rostered. Dalvin Cook was playing, obviously not now, but either way, Alexander Madison, he was already rostered, right? So there's not that many handcuffs where you could potentially pick up, widely available in leagues. Samaje Perine is one of those guys.
Definitely.
Xavian Howard, he's likely going to shadow Jamar Chase in this game. You're obviously still starting Chase. We saw what Rashad Bateman did, against Xavian Howard in week 2, where he caught that slant and took it to the house. Doesn't happen that often against Xavian Howard, but Jamar Chase is obviously capable of doing the same thing. So, I would still temper my expectations, but, obviously Jamar Chase is in your lineup. Miami has given up the 12th most fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers through 3 weeks. So this could mean a bigger game for T. Higgins, if, Joe Burrow decides not to test Xavian Howard all game long, right? And then Tyler Boyd, it might be a little sneaky too, because of that shadow coverage on Chase. Miami's actually given up the 4th most fantasy points to slot wide receivers through 3 weeks. So he's a little bit sneaky. He has 2 good games under his belt out of the 3 games so far.
Yeah. I'm looking at, we talked about Jamar Chase potentially, not having an awesome day because he has Xavian Howard shadowing him. Even if Xavian Howard doesn't shadow him, we've actually seen more of a distribution of targets, I think, from Joe Burrow to the Bengals receivers than we have preferential treatment towards Jamar Chase. That's kind of to the unhappiness of Jamar Chase owners. But, T. Higgins, he's a good start. Tyler Boyd even has some value because Joe Burrow's distributing the ball better than he did in last year, at least when you compare it. You look at Jamar Chase, the targets that he got and what he was able to do. But that kind of goes back to the Bengals running more plays. Like you said, you've been talking about all season, the offense moving faster and getting more plays in. That allows more targets to go around, and Jamar Chase isn't going to be open every play. T. Higgins is plenty good. And Tyler Boyd is also good. We talked about him. I think it was on yesterday's episode. Someone else. We compared somebody to him. But they're all good receivers, and there's no reason to think that they won't get the ball. And that's the way the offense has kind of been trending, at least so far this season.
Definitely. So yeah, I mean, all 3 of these wide receivers are in play. And you know what? They are number 1 in plays, like we were talking about, total plays per game, offensive plays per game. So there is a lot of room for all of these wide receivers to eat, and you never know which 2 are going to do it, right? Over the past couple of games. By the way, we didn't touch on this this week because we were talking about all this other stuff. That T. Higgins all down in the back of the end zone.
That wasn't Yeah.
that wasn't a touchdown. Oh my God. That was one of the, honestly, like it was one of the best like non-touchdowns I've ever seen in my life.
That was a touchdown though. It was just a
touchdown because he didn't get that heel down, right? Like he was so aware that I think he didn't like put that heel down on purpose, right? Like he kind of kept that heel up in the air and then like just like immediately he brought his foot up into the air. If I bring my heel down, like I'll hit the white. I'll hit the white line. But it didn't seem like he did. And dude, that was, and the camera angle, like the way where the camera was like looking up at it, it just made T. Higgins look like he was jumping up like 18 feet up in the air.
Right.
And honestly, it might have been 18 feet. Like it easily could have been. Like the dude has serious hops, man. That was an unbelievable catch right there.
T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, they're both wide receiver ones. And that's the problem because now they're both going to take targets from each other. And it's not like it's a T. Higgins always a wide receiver too. T. Higgins would be wide receiver 1 on a lot of teams, not just fantasy, but just talent wise. He's just ridiculous.
The dude is a beast. So yeah, you're obviously starting Tyreek, right? You're obviously starting Waddle. I don't think I'm necessarily like if Waddle wasn't playing, like I would have thought about like a DFS punt play with like Trent Sherfield or something like that. Not obviously in redraft. I think Cedric Wilson is banged up a little bit, and also like he might even lose his job to Trent Sherfield, to be honest. But as far as the Dolphins' backfield goes, I'm not touching it right now. I think they're both flex plays, Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert. The hope is that we'll see more of Edmonds' week 1 role. Like the 2 goal line touchdowns last week was awesome to see.
Yeah,
that role seemed to flip flop between week 2 and week 3 because Raheem Mostert was getting it before. But the fact that Chase Edmonds did convert those 2 touchdowns is a great thing to see, and maybe he continues to have that role, but it could continue to flip flop. We don't know. It's a wait and see for me right now if I can afford it.
If I had to pick between starting one or the other, if I was in a pinch and I had a choice between Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert, I'd put Chase Edmonds in every time.
Yeah.
This is just the passing game. And, we kind of saw a little bit more encouraging usage compared to week 2 last week with Chase Edmonds, and that could continue this week. The Dolphins have been in some high-scoring games, so there should be touchdowns to go around. And if Chase Edmonds happens to get one, that's all you're looking for out of your flex play, really. If you could get a touchdown of your flex play, and chances are you're getting a couple catches, you'll be fine. That's what he's going to give you.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's get right into our quarterback rankings, man. Let's do it.
Yes, sir.
We got Josh Allen at number 1. Big surprise. Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. So I got Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Lamar Jackson at 1 through 3. This Buffalo-Baltimore game is going to be a good one.
Yeah.
Right? Like Josh Allen, like he's going nuclear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Lamar Jackson, he's going nuclear. This is going to be a good game.
Yeah. Can Lamar Jackson go nuclear at this point? He's already been. He's put up 40 points back-to-back weeks.
What's better than nuclear? Like, whatever that is, he's that.
I don't know. Solar. I have no idea.
Solar.
But
dude, like these guys,
I'm
surprised. Be fireworks in this game, man.
I'm surprised you don't have them at 1 and 2. I feel like, well, I don't know. Jacksonville's better than we probably give them credit for. And, it is the Eagles that's playing them. But I just see, it's a marquee matchup, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. And they both have defenses that just are not very good at this point. Not that the Bills' defense isn't good. They're just banged up. But I think there's going to be so many fireworks with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I'm kind of surprised they have Lamar underneath Hurts.
Well, I have Lamar underneath Hurts because of the matchup. I think Buffalo's defense is still good, right? And I think they can give Lamar some problems, right? I totally understand. Lamar's been absolutely killing it, but Jalen Hurts has been killing it too, and he has a much better matchup than Lamar Jackson. So,
it's fair.
I can easily see Jalen Hurts outscoring Lamar Jackson this week, and I agree. Like if Josh Allen didn't have such a good defense behind him, I would probably have these guys at 1 and 2 because Lamar Jackson has been absolutely destroying defenses lately. So yeah, no, I can see it. Now, we'll see if Buffalo's secondary continues to be banged up, right? If that's the case, yeah, I could put them up there. Regardless, these guys 1 through 3, you're starting them either way. They're going to be in your lineup regardless.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes at 4, Joe Burrow at 5, Justin Herbert at 6. Hopefully Herbert feels better this week because he was not himself last week.
No. And he kind of cost me my game, which was really unfortunate. But he should be much better this week. We thought that Jacksonville would be an easier matchup for him, but clearly that wasn't the case. He was also banged up, and it was just a really weird game overall because Jacksonville actually looked very good against the Chargers. This is a much worse Houston team that they're going to be playing against. It should be a get-right game. If Justin Herbert's feeling better, he'll be right back to his usual production, the very consistent and reliable production that we know him to have. And with Patrick Mahomes against Tampa Bay, that's an interesting one. I like Patrick Mahomes there. I think Joe Burrow might actually have a little bit more upside if this Bengals offense looks like the Bengals offense that we know. Patrick Mahomes playing against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has held a lot of teams to not so many points. I mean, they just kicked the crap out of the Cowboys. Granted, that was Dak Prescott. He's having a rough game. They stifled the Saints, and then who'd they just play? The Packers. They actually got beat, but they still held them to 14 points regardless. I kind of see that kind of coming down on Patrick Mahomes and limiting his upside. I think Joe Burrow, I would put Joe Burrow over Patrick Mahomes personally, but I see what you're doing with him at 4.
Yeah, I think Burrow, if you had to play the upside, I think Joe Burrow does have more upside than Mahomes. But the only concern I have with Burrow is if any sort of pass rush gets to him, it's going to be affecting them. He's been throwing interceptions, and that's my main issue with Burrow. With Mahomes, like we kind of know that he's going to give you that production, like he's going to be solid regardless of matchup for the most part. Burrow is a little bit iffy, and I actually have Burrow elevated this week to 5 because of the matchup. You know what I mean? But I don't think I can put him over Mahomes this week. But it's super close. It's 4 and 5. But I hear what you're saying. For upside, I would be like if I'm playing DFS. Well, it depends, right? Because it depends on what kind of DFS you're playing, right? If you're shooting for the upside, I think Burrow has the most upside here. But Mahomes, I think not that many people will have Mahomes in their lineup. So if you're looking for some sort of like, if you're trying to play the odds and you're trying to see like ownership percentage, and Mahomes might not be super owned this week because of that matchup. That's an interesting one.
Right.
Now, hopefully, Justin Herbert gets Keenan Allen back this week. That should help him out a little bit. Now, if you look at the implied totals for this week, Chargers do have the 5th highest implied total on the week. So Vegas is actually expecting some points out of them. So actually a lot of points out of them. So I think you'll be okay with Justin Herbert this week. Vegas knows something. Vegas knows everything. I got Colin Murray at 7, Tua at 8, Kirk Cousins at 9, Tom Brady at 10. I did move Brady up a bit based on Mike Evans. Like he's actually in the top 10, which might be surprising. Mike Evans is back this week. Julio possibly being back. Russell Gage, seemingly healthy now after his big game last week, and Tom Brady starting to trust him. And then with KC, kind of going with the Patrick Mahomes thing. If I had Patrick Mahomes at 4, then, I'm kind of expecting some points to be scored in this game. So, I think because of that, I have Tom Brady at 9. Just curious, like looking at these 4, Murray, Tua, Kirk, and Brady, what would you change there, if anything?
I actually like this ranking.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with this. Kyler Murray, I have at 7, obviously. I think that we could finally, and I've said this multiple weeks in a row now, finally see Kyler Murray do Kyler Murray things, and actually just blow up and have like his breakout game, score more than the even 20 that he's had recently. But they're playing against Carolina. I don't think Carolina's going to do much to keep up with the Cardinals, even though the Cardinals are banged up on offense still. So I like him at 7. Tua at 8, I like that because like I said, if it's a shootout tonight with Joe Burrow, Tua, it's the same thing. Brady, I like him. I like moving him up there at 10. Kirk Cousins, I like him at 9 though. Yeah, I agree with these rankings, so it's hard to say much. But
I hear you.
Kirk Cousins, he has a good matchup against the Saints. It should be relatively high scoring. I'm not sure what the implied total is on that one or what the spread is that they're calling it. The Saints and the Vikings. But there should be plenty of offense in that one. I like Justin Jefferson to get back on track this week because he's had 2 quiet weeks. It's hard to imagine him having 3 quiet weeks. And if Justin Jefferson's having a good game, then Kirk Cousins can be having a good game.
Yeah. And we'll see what happens with Jameis Winston, whether he plays or not, because that might make a little bit of a difference in terms of like what this game script looks like.
Yeah.
Andy Dalton, might end up doing his thing. But, Michael Thomas banged up, Jarvis Landry banged up. That offense might be a little bit banged up going into this week. So I think there's going to be a few things to kind of consider, later in the week. So, and we'll see what those practice reports end up looking like.
Right. And if Dalton Cook misses with Kirk Cousins, if he does miss, we don't know if he's going to. It's going to be a much more pass-heavy attack.
Maybe. I mean, we've seen Madison, say like get his as well. But
Yeah.
the Saints do have a decent front, so they might end up doing just that. Moving on to 11 through 20, I have Derek Carr at 11, followed by Jared Goff. Carr, Vegas has a 24-point implied total, which is solid. Detroit has a 26-point implied total this week, which is third, only behind Buffalo and Philly. So Goff has a chance of putting up some points this week, despite not having DeAndre Swift this week, most likely. But we also have to see what's up with Amon-Ra St. Brown and his ankle, right?
Yeah.
It's not 100% that he suits up this week. And if he doesn't, I might stay away from Goff, and move him down quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair because we saw Amon-Ra St. Brown come off the field a little bit last week, and the offense was not nearly as dynamic or as good as it was with Amon-Ra St. Brown on the field. So not only does Amon-Ra St. Brown take a hit, obviously, if he doesn't play, you're not going to have him in your lineup. But if he's not on the field, then I think the rest of the Lions offense has to take a bit of a hit as well. And that's why, we might see Jared Goff move down from this position a little bit. Do you think?
I think so. I think he might move down to like maybe 15 or something like that.
Yeah, because this is assuming Amon-Ra St. Brown plays, which I'm totally on board with him at 12 if he does. If he doesn't, it might be the Jamal Williams show. I'm not saying it's going to be all him on offense. They do have guys that can catch a ball in DJ Chark and I forget the one guy, Josh Reynolds. Jared Goff for some reason likes throwing to him. But so they're not going to be completely devoid of weapons, but the offense isn't the same without Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I'd keep an eye on his status, like you said, and then we'll re-rank Jared Goff accordingly if he doesn't suit up.
Yes. Now I have Marcus Mariota at 13, and the rushing from Mariota has kept his floor high. And if you don't want to mess around, right, and just want to get points from your quarterback, he's your guy, right? Yeah. Like he's gonna do his thing. He might not have that 25-point ceiling. Actually, he might if he ends up scoring a rushing touchdown, right, on top of 40, 50 yards rushing. Yeah. Could happen. But I think Mariota is as safe as it gets right now.
Yeah, the rushing floor is what keeps him there. And that's kind of what some of us were hoping for with Justin Fields, that his rushing floor would keep him afloat. And that's
when you say some of us, you mean you.
Yeah. I drafted him very late, hoping that I'd be able to cash in on some upside. That hasn't been the case. But, Marcus Mariota, I think you're right with the floor. I'm not sure what his ceiling is. Maybe if he throws to Kyle Pitts more, he could unlock that ceiling.
Ooh, but that'd be nice.
Yeah. But I think 13's appropriate right now.
Carson Wentz might be a little low here at 14. He's going up against Dallas, right? And it's a tough matchup. Like Vegas has the I was going to say Redskins, the Commanders at the one of the lowest implied totals on the week, and probably because Dallas's defense is good and they're at home,
and their offense isn't that good,
right? So Carson Wentz, I have him at 14 here just because of the fact that they're going to throw a lot. They have the weapons. So this is kind of high considering the matchup and considering the low implied total. But just kind of temper expectations if you are starting Carson Wentz this week. At 15, we have Rodgers, Trevor Lawrence in Philly. That is a little bit of a tough matchup as well for him. He would be higher, if he wasn't going up against Philly this week, because Lawrence has been looking good. And I might have had Lawrence as like a, high end QB2, somewhere around the Derek Carr, Jared Goff, Marcus Mariota range. I think that's where I would have him.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because, Trevor Lawrence, we've seen him play. And not that the Chargers defense was banged up, but they're still a quality defense, and he tore it up. So he's looking like the real deal. Against Philly, I think that it's fair to have him ranked a little bit lower. He'll probably be under pressure a lot more than he was last week, especially with Joey Bosa missing. But, you think next week, do you think Trevor Lawrence would be in a week? We don't have to say next week. In a week where it's not the Eagles, is Trevor Lawrence maybe a top 12 quarterback for you?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say he's probably going to be, and let's see how he does this week. Maybe he's not too bad, and if he is, he will be a no-brainer top 12 for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If the Eagles get ahead too, there could be some garbage time game script for him. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen. Jacksonville has looked pretty competitive in all the games that they've played, so we'll see. But the Eagles are a different animal. They're not they're not anything the Jaguars have seen yet this season. So we'll see how they handle it. And then this could be telling for Trevor Lawrence's value going forward. If he does well, that's going to really be something.
Oh yeah.
He could
Oh yeah. I mean,
he could see his value skyrocket.
I can see myself placing him over Derek Carr, Jared Goff, Mariota. Wentz would normally be higher as well. So I would have both Wentz and Lawrence most weeks potentially as top 12 guys.
That's fair.
Yeah. So let's see. Who else do I have here? So I have Russ at 17, Matthew Stafford at 18, Geno Smith, and then Jameis Winston to round it out. Jameis Winston, obviously, like we talked about it, a little iffy to play this week. And if he doesn't go, Andy Dalton will be under center. And to be honest with you, like I might just 1-for-1 replace Jameis Winston with Andy Dalton here at 20.
I think so,
after 20, it gets a little bleak. So I wouldn't necessarily be, Andy Dalton, like, he had a couple spot starts and he was fine. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily, really worried about him at all. I think he should be good.
Yeah, I think that's fair. With James Winston, and Andy Dalton, you swap them out. I think that's 100%. I was going to jump on and say that if you didn't.
Yeah.
I think they're very similar at this point right now. Like a banged up James Winston is going to give you as much value as a healthy Andy Dalton, and vice versa. So
I can see it.
I think that's fair. I just think it's funny that we're ranking Russell Wilson as QB 17 at this point. I was not expecting that at all. It's just something that I'm pointing out.
Do you think I was going to ask you that actually. It's good you brought it up. Like, do you think it's appropriate?
I think it is. I mean, for what we've seen so far, I'm just noting that how surprising it is. Like, here we are sitting with Carson Wentz higher on fantasy rankings than Russell Wilson. Trevor Lawrence higher
in a bad matchup.
Yeah, so it's really telling. Like what's going on with Russell Wilson, we're not sure. Some people, I don't think you drafted him very high, but you probably drafted him low, thinking like, all right, this should pan out. It'll be a good value.
You drafted him thinking like, oh, this is going to be a value.
Yeah,
and he has the upside of being a top 5 fantasy quarterback.
And you look at the offense that he's on, you're like, man, this is better than it was in Seattle. And he was a top 5 quarterback multiple times in Seattle. So now we're sitting here, he has all these weapons, and Russell Wilson scoring 11 points and just barely squeaking out against the Niners. Like that it's just super confusing. I think it's worth noting. It's not really fantasy advice, but just something to note. It's one of the storylines I'm looking at. I thought he would have it together by now.
I agree, man. I agree. I think it's going to happen though, like at some point. But like it's looked pretty bad. And
yeah,
I want to blame the head coach. I want to blame Nathaniel Hackett. He's making a bunch of hires now because he's realizing that he doesn't know how to be a head coach. I think he's made 2 hires so far in the last like 2 weeks, like to help him with different things. But Russell Wilson, is being affected by that. Now, like I never thought I would say this. I kind of miss Pete Carroll.
Man, coming from you,
from me,
that's
like
that's
I've been
rough.
the Pete Carroll hater here, and now I gotta take some, I gotta take some responsibility over these takes here, right? Because I'm like Russell Wilson was being held back by that Seattle head coach, and now I'm like, oh okay, I'm not sure about that anymore.
If Russell Wilson's going to turn it around, this would be a good week to do it. It's the Raiders. They're 0-3. It's a divisional game, so generally they'll be pretty close. I'm hoping we finally see. It's not even that we need Russell Wilson to have like a monster 30-point fantasy day. We just need a little life from the Broncos offense, because the only reason they're 2-1 is because of their defense. A little life from the Broncos offense would be huge in helping us to understand that Russell Wilson's going to be fine. But right now, I hit the panic button like the end of last week that Russell Wilson's kind of not showing up. I will turn the panic button back off if he can show up this week and perform well.
I'm with you. All right, let's hit these running back rankings. Christian McCaffrey at number 1, Jonathan Taylor at number 2. Then I got Saquon Barkley at 3, Fournette at 4, Nick Chubb at 5. Now, obviously, we talked about McCaffrey. Just watch out for his practice report today. Jonathan Taylor, he's good to go. Saquon had a solid day, against a tough defense, right, on Monday night. It's what you want to see from Saquon. Where you drafted him, you're very happy with his production so far. But Fournette, he might seem a little high here, right? Based on the fantasy points that he's scored lately.
Yeah.
But his usage, his underlying utilization is that of a high-end RB1, and he's bound to explode and have a big game at some point. And then you have Chubb here at 5, who has been great. He is like me having him at 5. That's a talent play. It's the fact that he's been balling lately. And, for me, given Chubb's role, which is not an ideal role for fantasy, it's just that he's so good, right? And he's been scoring touchdowns that, how can you not have him in the top 5? And this might be low for a lot of people because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Chubb is the number 1 overall running back so far in fantasy. So, I think, either way, these guys should be both in lineups, but I think, this is the week where Fournette finally, gets in the end zone. Number 1, he hasn't gotten the end zone yet. And number 2, starts getting peppered with targets because he's running around on almost every one of Brady's dropbacks, which is super rare for a running back.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think Nick Chubb at 5 is too far-fetched right now because, like you said, of the way he's playing and we know the talent.
Is it too low?
So
right, like
this, it's tough.
For me, it's like I don't want to put him like too high, and I want to put him too low because he's been killing it. His role isn't ideal, right? Like Fournette and Chubb are like the exact opposites right now. Fournette has like the amazing role, but he hasn't got it done yet. Chubb doesn't have the most ideal role when it comes to fantasy, early down grinder, but he's like the best early down grinder in the league, right? But at the same time, it's like, who do you put first, right? The guy who's been doing it, or the guy who most likely, the chances are, given data, Fournette would probably be have the better game, especially in PPR leagues.
Yeah, and that goes back to, receiving work being much more valuable than rushing work. But Nick Chubb just gets it done so well with rushing work that it feels like he's getting all these catches, especially when you look at the box score. He's running very well, and that's no surprise. He's capitalizing a lot better, I think, on the work that he's getting this season than he was last season. And that's a good thing. I think that goes back to, the Browns offense operating with a backup quarterback, even though Jacoby Brissett has performed admirably. If they can let Nick Chubb shoulder the load, they will, and he's reaping the benefits of that now. I agree with Leonard Fournette over Nick Chubb. The thing that I have to say about the top 5 is how much longer are we just going to default to Christian McCaffrey at 1? Because we know his usage is there, but now, the injuries there. It's like, I'd feel more confident, and this is just nitpicking. I feel maybe more confident with Jonathan Taylor or even Saquon Barkley at 1 at this point.
Right. I hear you. Well, listen, Jonathan Taylor even hasn't got it done, over the past couple of weeks. Right. And, he hasn't, like in week 2, he only had 9 carries, right? He didn't hit the double, carry mark. Christian McCaffrey, the past 2 games, he's gotten a ton of volume in the run game though. And he hit 100 yards each of the last 2 weeks on the ground. So he's still getting work. He just hasn't gotten the end zone. And at some point, he's going to start getting peppered with targets, similar to what we talking about with Leonard Fournette. That's the hope. Like, the difference is that between those two is like Fournette, we know Brady loves to check it down. We know Brady loves to look for his running back. Yeah. And at some point, again, they don't have much of a competent, coaching staff in Carolina, but at some point you're going to have to say like, hey, we got to get the ball to Christian McCaffrey in the pass game, right? We're underutilizing him there. And so because of that, that's the reason why I have Christian McCaffrey at number 1.
Yeah, that's my gripe with Christian McCaffrey. Where he was so good was a passing game, and they haven't used him at all like that this season so far. And whether that's Baker Mayfield's fault or whether that's the coaching staff's fault or a combination of the two, I don't know. But what I do know is that he's missing his role in the passing game, and I think that would really open up the offense a little bit. I mean, I'm not an NFL coach, but what I've seen from Christian McCaffrey in the past, and there is him excelling in the passing game, and they haven't used him there yet. So maybe if anyone's listening from the Panthers organization, try that. Give Christian McCaffrey a couple of looks in the passing game.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Let me see where these guys are ranked right now in terms of points per game. Jonathan Taylor's at 11. I'm sorry, Jonathan Taylor's at 10 at 15.6 PPR points a game, and Christian McCaffrey is at 11 with 15.3 fantasy points per game. The guys ahead of him right now, Saquon is number 1 with 22.6 PPR points per game, followed by Nick Chubb, James Robinson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, DeAndre Swift, Cordell Patterson, Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and Khalil Herbert. Obviously, Khalil Herbert just had that one big game last week, but he was the overall RB1 last week. But yeah, anyway,
have you noticed that like just this season, RBs, running backs have been pretty quiet compared to what we've seen in the past?
Oh yeah, and it's interesting, man. But to me, what that tells me right now is that there's a ton of buy low opportunities that you can kind of take advantage of, because at some point, especially later on in the season, some of these running backs are going to have monster games, right? And like it's going to happen. So instead of it all happening early in the year, there's a lot of it going to be happening later in the year. And we're going to see some blow up games at some point. It's all it's always ebbs, and so happens that the production has been lower in the beginning of the year, but I do think it's going to end up picking up at some point. It always does. It always levels out, at some point. But scoring overall has been down in the NFL. Not just running backs.
In general, with running backs, being down, I did tell you to go 0 running back this year. So
you did.
Yeah. No, it's just a joke, but
it's a joke, but I
just find it really interesting because I'm looking around the league, like nobody's had like that blow away game.
You know what's funny, dude? Like, after week 1, like all the 0 RB truthers are like, see. Jamar Chase went off. Devontae Adams went off. Justin Jefferson went off. Right? All of those guys went off in week 1. Stephon Diggs. And then in week 2, like things got a lot quiet, right? Devontae Adams, like, he scored a touchdown, but like
that was all he did.
Stephon Diggs was the only one who kept doing his thing every single week. Jamar Chase, relatively quiet. Justin Jefferson, relatively quiet over the last 2 weeks as well. So it's just interesting. Ebbs and flows, dude. It's gonna happen, and we were talking about it yesterday, on the Mind of Mansion podcast, the Roto Underworld with with Matt. We were talking about it, and it was a lot of like teams are playing a lot of zone now, a lot more than they were in the past with these high shell coverage looks, where the perimeter wide receivers, unless you're playing man, unless you can find the opening in the zone, it's a lot tougher for these perimeter wide receivers, especially if they are more if their game is more separation against man coverage opposed to finding the open spot in the zone, right? So these coaches, a lot more is going to be put on these coaches now to scheme these wide receivers open. And we were talking about all these slot wide receivers doing their thing, and it's because the slot wide receivers, starting on the inside, easier to find a spot in the zone. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Cooper Kupp, all these type of guys, like that's where the evolution is right now, in terms of like where we're at with wide receivers, going up against these type of coverages right now, where teams aren't necessarily playing as much man anymore. If I'm not mistaken, I think I saw a stat where it's up to like 70% of plays are zone coverage at this point, just across the league.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Where it used to be a lot lower, right? But yeah, Tampa was famous for that. Back in the day, their famous cover 2 coverage.
Tampa,
not many teams used to do that, and now a lot of teams are playing that shell coverage. But anyway,
we digress.
We digress. I got Dalvin Cook at 6 here. I'm okay playing Dalvin Cook this week if he suits up. Okay. I think he's a solid RB play for me either way. I'm not going to try and assume, too much about his workload. He's played with this injury before. He's had big workloads with the harness on. If he suits up, he'll be in my lineup. Who knows what's going to happen, right? But I'm not going to get cute with it and start. Maybe you put Joe Mixon over Dalvin Cook. Okay, I think that's fair. Joe Mixon hasn't looked great this year either, to be honest with you. But he's also
the opportunity has been there. I'll give you that. That they're giving him the ball a lot. But
yeah. But I'll play Dalvin Cook this week. I don't have a problem with that. I got Joe Mixon at 7 here, James Conner at 8. Cliff Kingsbury did come out and say that they want to get James Conner a lot more involved in the offense, and we've kind of been expecting that. We've been talking about James Conner a lot this week, so I'll save you guys from us talking about him a lot more. But I expect his volume and his snaps and his role to move up from what we saw last week. Week 2, he was banged up. I have him in my top 10 here. Followed by Austin Eckler at number 9. We're hoping that he starts getting more involved with his Chargers offense getting better. The amount of carries that he got last week was pretty bad, embarrassing. It was like only a couple.
Yeah.
How many carries did he have? 4 carries in that game or something like that?
It was a really low number. I think it might have been 5.
Yeah. And then I have Jamal Williams here at number 10. Assuming that DeAndre Swift is going to miss this week, I think that Jamal Williams, deserves a shot to be at number 10. He's already in an RB1 right now in terms of fantasy points per game, and that's with DeAndre Swift playing for the most part. So
right.
I have
Austin Eckler, he did have 4 carries. I mixed it up. His yardage was 5.
Oh my goodness.
Is that all?
That's brutal.
It's rough. It was a rough week for him, but he did get the targets that kept him afloat relatively.
Yeah. So, if he starts doing his thing in the run game, starts doing his thing in the passing game, he'll end up doing his thing. But, the one thing we're worried about, as we talked about yesterday, is the fact that, he might not be getting those goal line looks anymore. He did get some, like They didn't take all of his goal line snaps away. He did get
Right.
a couple of goal line carries this year so far, but he might not get all of them. And that's what we're kind of afraid of. But hopefully that kind of changes moving forward. What do you think about Jamal at 10?
I like Jamal Williams at 10. I think that's where he's. I don't want to call it his ceiling, but
Well, look, I'll just real quick. I have Kamara at 11, Aaron Jones at 12, Derrick Henry at 13. So just to kind of give some context with Jamal at 10.
We know the workload is going to be there for Jamal Williams, and he's not only used in the running game. He's also caught some passes. So Jamal Williams is going to be fine. I like him there. The workload is like guaranteed, and the offense should be good. And like I said, as long as Amon-Ra St. Brown plays, not that Jamal Williams is as contingent on Amon-Ra St. Brown playing as maybe Jared Goff is, but the whole offense overall would take a hit. Might not be the touchdown upside that Jamal Williams has had the first few weeks because the Lions offense has actually been pretty good. And a lot of that has to do with Amon-Ra St. Brown. So again, keep an eye on that. I think his workload is locked in. The offense is better than Alvin Kamara right now. Aaron Jones, he has on and off weeks. I mean, if we're just looking down the list that we have, he has his on and off weeks. He pops off, and then it's an A.J. Dillon day. It's just weird. Derrick Henry hasn't looked the same. He caught a couple passes last week that kind of inflated his numbers a little bit. He did get in the end zone, but Derrick Henry, I think that he has to sit behind Jamal Williams right now just because of the way the offenses are. That offense isn't that dynamic. It was just a rough Raiders team that they were playing last week. I don't know if that's going to continue. I actually like the Colts kind of in this one, the matchup. If they can limit Derrick Henry, then they should be able to win the game. But obviously, we'll see. Derrick Henry hasn't looked the same, so we'll see how he looks against Indianapolis. I still like Jamal Williams over all of those guys. I think that these rankings are pretty sound.
Okay. So we have Khalil Herbert here at 14 to replace David Montgomery, assuming that he doesn't go this week. Naji Harris at 15. Now, this top 15 pretty much set. I think outside of that, because we have Javonte, Cordell, James Robinson, like after that tier. So I think the top 15 is kind of set, but it could change depending on how you order these guys. Khalil Herbert, it's possible he sees an every down type of workload. He did see it every down type of workload in the second half, despite Tristan Ebner being pretty involved early on when David Montgomery got hurt. But Herbert started balling out. They didn't take him off the field. Would it be getting too cute to start him over any of the, the top, 11, 12, and 13, Kamara, Jones, and Henry?
Yeah. I feel like it is getting a little.
I feel like you might start him over Alvin Kamara.
I would maybe consider it just this week because the way until Alvin Kamara shows me that he's going to produce, and I'm going to go on record now as a Kamara hater because everyone's going to watch this podcast and going to be like, "Oh, this guy hates Kamara. He's starting Khalil Herbert over him." It's not that, but until I see that the production can be there in the offense, it's not so much the problem I have with Alvin Kamara as it is with the Saints offense. I think it's fundamentally changed. It's moved away from Kamara right now, so I don't like that. I would say that putting Khalil Herbert over Aaron Jones is a mistake, and Derrick Henry is a mistake because we said we saw what Aaron Jones can do when he gets the touches, he does very well. It's just, is A.J. Dillon going to be a factor day in, day out? And Derrick Henry, right now he's benefiting from name value. The Khalil Herbert, there's no guarantee that the Bears offense is going to play that well. I think that the Giants are supposed to get Leonard Williams back this week, and he's a big run stopper for them. So I'm not sure how the Bears offense is going to look against the Giants. Remember, it was the Texans they were playing against last week, and it might not be the same. The Giants defense is not that bad. So I'd say it's a little cute to put him over anybody else, but he is essentially the offense at this point. I mean, the game plan, I don't think the Giants have much game film to review from last week or moving forward. I think it's just going to be the run game all day. Herbert will be fine. He's a fine plays volume. I'm not sure the ceiling is going to be there, but he should get enough touches to make him relevant. And if he gets in the end zone, he shouldn't have any problem hitting like 15, 16 points. And that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, he might be safer than Aaron Jones, because Aaron Jones is up and down.
Yeah, you're right.
He's more volatile, right? But if you're looking for the ceiling play, it's probably Aaron Jones, right? Yeah. Against New England. And it could be an A.J. Dillon game because, New England, they're not going to have their main quarterback. They're going to have Brian Hoyer in that game. He might not play well, and we might see Green Bay just kind of controlling that game throughout. But there might be a lot of touches to go around for these two guys. New England, even dating back to last year, they've been pretty bad at stopping running backs from catching the ball. So that's part of the reason why I have Aaron Jones at 12. I think he does actually have a pretty good game this week in the receiving game.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Naji Harris at 15, he's going to get the touches, right? Jalen Warren has been creeping in a little bit, into that workload. And I don't think that's going to stop. I don't think that Naji Harris is going to see 90% of touches moving forward. Now, and that's kind of what you were hoping for because, with Naji Harris, it's like you want him to get as many touches as possible. So the inefficiency doesn't matter as much. But if he's not going to get as many touches, then the inefficiency starts to, matter. Against the Jets this week, I think it ends up being it ends up being okay because I think he's going to end up getting his touches this week. So I'm not extremely worried about it.
I think the inefficiency gets magnified because the offense is much worse than it was even last season. He had the inefficiency last season, but he got a couple touchdowns. So that was fine. The offense was able to move down the field and get him in the position to score some easy touchdowns on the goal line, stuff like that. That hasn't been the case this year. And now we're seeing it, the relatively low fantasy outputs. The floor is there. That's what we're looking for. But the upside has kind of been capped. His ceiling's been relatively low. I think his ceiling is right now hovering at like just around 20 points. And that's assuming he gets in the end zone. Otherwise, we're looking at the same type of production that he's put up these past few weeks, like the 12-13 range. That just hasn't been very fulfilling. But against the Jets, I could see him being on the higher end of his range of outcomes.
I have Javonte Williams at 16, Cordell Patterson at 17, followed by James Robinson, followed by Jeff Wilson, and then Damien Pierce. Would you play James Robinson over Javonte Williams at this point? The Broncos offense isn't looking great, right? Melvin Gordon seemingly being the preferred goal line option right now.
Yeah.
Javonte is running more routes. He is being targeted more in the pass game. So his floor is obviously a little higher. James Robinson against Philly, a little bit risky, right? Because, Philly can go up in this game. And if they do, the Jaguars might have to abandon the run game a little bit. And that's what the Jaguars haven't had to do over the first 3 games. They haven't had to abandon the run game. And James Robinson was able to do his thing. Week 2, he didn't get that many carries, but he ended up breaking off that long run. And he ended up going, over 100 yards and scoring 4 touchdowns in 3 weeks. Does that happen this week? Right? That's the question.
Yeah. So you asked, should I be starting James Robinson over Javonte Williams at this point? This week, no. Maybe next week. Javonte Williams has a much better matchup. James Robinson, like you said, the Jaguars might have to abandon the run, but it's not so much about the Jaguars abandoning the run as much as it is, Travis Etienne could be on the field many more snaps than he's been recently because they could be in catch-up mode.
Exactly.
The Eagles are a good team, and you don't want to put it past the Jaguars to give them a run for their money. The Jaguars are a fine team, obviously. I think they're much better than we've seen them, and Trevor Lawrence looks much better than they did, so it should keep them competitive. I don't think they're going to be down and out of this game like we'd expect them to be other years, but it might be more of a competitive match, and then, midway through the third, things start to give way, and then you see like a whole quarter of action from Travis Etienne. That's kind of what I'm anticipating. But James Robinson, regardless, even if they are in the game, it's a tough Philly front that he's going to be running up against. I could see him kind of coming back down to earth this week. I think that 18 is good for him.
Yeah. Cordell Patterson's at 17. He's not being used in the pass game, man. He's really he's depending on those big plays. I don't like that, right? I would love for him to get targeted. I think he only had 1 target each of the last 2 weeks, which is not what you want with Cordell Patterson. You can't depend on that run game from him, right? And that's a little bit. What's that?
I said, let's stat that. Let's see. Did he actually get 1? Yeah, 1 target each of the past 2 weeks.
Yeah. So it's like, I have a pretty good memory, man.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, but like, you know what? It's tough because Cordell Patterson, you want to play him. He's been putting up numbers, but again, he's a guy who could come back down to earth. The matchup isn't terrible, but the fact that he's not being used in the pass game a ton, which is where the huge production we saw last year from him, that's really where it came from, right?
Yeah.
Jeff Wilson at 19, Damien Pierce at 20. I think this is solid. We don't know like Jeff Wilson's volume can be anywhere from like 10 carries to 20 carries. He's been pretty efficient though over the past 2 weeks. And he is likely their goal line guy as well. We'll see what this matchup ends up looking like. The 49ers do have a really, really good matchup in terms of their wide receivers. So it is possible that they do end up moving the ball. And Jeff Wilson could get some opportune touchdowns. So I think he's a fine RB2 start this week. Damien Pierce, we'll see if the Texans can stay in this game against the Chargers, or the Chargers can't get things going like last week, then Damien Pierce will get volume. Otherwise, it might be a little bit tough for Damien Pierce. If Houston can't stay in this game, just like James Robinson, they're going to end up abandoning the run here, and we might see more Rex Burkhead on the field than Damien Pierce.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do like Damien Pierce as long as they're in a decent game script. I think he's kind of earned his way to the point where he's getting the majority of the touches. I'm not expecting it to stay in that game script, in a good game script for Damien Pierce. Assuming the Chargers get back on track. If we see the Chargers team from last week, this could be a Damien Pierce game. But I'm not anticipating that. The Chargers should get back on track with Justin Herbert healthy. It's hard to imagine Davis Mills being able to keep up with him. And I was calling on the Texans and saying that, this could be finally a fantasy relevant offense. But Davis Mills, I was talking up Brandon Cooks. It just hasn't looked that way so far. The Texans offense hasn't looked as good as I hoped they would be. So if Justin Herbert is playing like Justin Herbert, I don't see them staying in this game. Damien Pierce could be kind of left out to dry with Rex Burkhead catching passes for most of the afternoon.
I have a feeling if the Chargers secondary is still a little bit banged up, I have a feeling that Brandon Cooks is going to have a big game this week.
All right. I hope so, because I have him in a couple of leagues.
All right. So let's move on to week to 21 to 30. Devin Singletary at 21. This one might be a little surprising, but Devin Singletary's usage last week was legit, and his utilization went up big time. It was really like a split, between James Cook obviously came out a little bit. He was playing a little bit more, Zach Moss as well. But just looking at what he was doing last week, 74% of snaps. He ran around on 61% of dropbacks after running 67% of dropbacks the week before. He just ended up getting targeted more, right? 22% targets per route run this past week. So he was being used in the pass game, 53% of the rushing attempts, which is not what we saw in week 2. He was only down at 20%. So we know that this can flip-flop back and forth, right? But when you look at these guys here, and by the way, at 23, we're showing Michael Carter. That's supposed to say Breece Hall, not Michael Carter. But at 21, Devin Singletary, I think, when you go with guys like Antonio Gibson, Breece Hall, AJ Dillon, Miles Sanders, who we have at 21 through 25, I think I'll take the shot at Devin Singletary, especially given the fact that this is probably going to be a shootout between the Bills and the Ravens.
Baltimore. Yeah, no. I kind of chalk up Devin Singletary's usage. I don't want to just say it's all on this, but a lot of it, I think, goes to the fact that the Bills ran so many plays compared to the Dolphins. That might have allowed more opportunity for Devin Singletary to just run out. And it was weird because he was getting targeted, like hyper-targeted. Not just Devin Singletary, but all the Bills running backs were just getting targets thrown their way by Josh Allen. And that's not something I expect to see every week, especially against Baltimore. I think that because of this performance, it's fair that you could have him at 21, but I'm not necessarily ecstatic about his prospects over guys like Antonio Gibson, Breece Hall, even AJ Dillon. AJ Dillon has a chance. His workload might be a little bit more secure because we know he's going to get the touches. It's just, is it going to be more his way or Aaron Jones's way? Devin Singletary, if he's catching passes, you're fine. Otherwise, I think he's kind of further down the list for me.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think Breece Hall finally made his way into the RB2 ranks. Antonio Gibson, this week against Dallas, we'll see if, Washington can be in a positive game strip. I doubt it, or even a neutral game strip. I doubt it. That's the reason why I have Gibson there. He hasn't seen a big workload in terms of the pass game, in terms of the run game so far through 3 weeks. That's really where his value, lies. So I don't see him having a huge game this week. Now, AJ Dillon is interesting because, if the Packers go up in this game, I can see him getting a ton of volume. We kind of saw that against the Bears in week 2, where Dillon ended up getting, I think, 17 or 18 carries in that game. He just wasn't efficient. But in most games, I think AJ Dillon, if he gets 18 carries, he's going to come through for you. So I think Dillon's a decent start this week. In week 1, he saw a ton of targets, right? Which was great. But in week 2 and 3, he didn't see that same type of workload, which is a little bit disappointing because of the fact that, we're kind of depending on that. Now he just turned into an early down grinder who's sharing the workload with Aaron Jones. So that's my concern with him. So, I think all these guys are kind of between Gibson, AJ Dillon, Miles Sanders, even Zeke Elliott at 27, Josh Jacobs at 28, these guys are like these early down grinders, right? Who isn't being used heavily in the pass game, right? So they're kind of like intermingled a little bit. Miles Sanders, he hasn't reached the end zone over the past 2 weeks. However, he's been getting some decent volume. This offense is good. And, the fact that he's healthy right now, I think he's a much better start than I thought he would be over the last couple weeks. So I moved him up a little bit to 25, right at the borderline of the RB2 guys.
I think he's a quality flex at this point because Jalen Hurts does do a lot of the rushing for the Eagles, and they have suddenly a bunch of weapons in the passing game. Devontae Smith kind of had his breaking out party last week. Not that we didn't think he was good, but the offense is good. I think you can rely on Miles Sanders. The touchdown upside is there where anybody could get a touchdown anytime. I'm happy playing him as a flex. Coming in the season, I wasn't really happy playing him at all. I know we talked so many times about him saying, "Don't draft me for fantasy." It's looking like you could have drafted him for fantasy and been all right. I think he's outperforming expectations just because they were as low as they were. But he's on a good offense, so you can't really take that away from him. He's there. He's going to get the touches, and if he gets a touchdown, I think you're going to have yourself, like I said, a quality flex play each week.
One of the guys I'm excited to watch this week is Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah,
I have him at 26 here, and this can be low. Okay, and the reason why I would like him to be higher, or I was thinking about putting him higher, is because of the utilization that he's shown over the past 2 weeks. Can that flip flop? Can that go back to Damien Harris in terms of him being the primary rusher? Maybe, but this past week, Stevenson was the primary rusher, 50%. 51% of the rushing attempts this week. Damien Harris was at 46%, 65% route participation for Ramondre Stevenson. Followed, that was after his 58% in week 2. He got 20%. He was targeted 20% of the time, 16% target share last week. That's what you want to see, man. And I think Brian Hoyer is the type of quarterback to check it down. We can see a bunch of targets to Ramondre Stevenson this week. I think he's a perfect. I would even play him as an RB2 if you have to. I have him conservatively at 26, but his usage really is more of a high-end RB2 type of play. But I don't want to put him there just yet, right? Because not only that, like Damien Harris would probably get the first crack at the goal line. That can change because we've seen last week Stevenson, once he got to the goal line, it was him who took that goal line score in. And we saw that last year too, where they were kind of flip-flop between these two guys in terms of goal line carries.
Yeah, I like Ramondre Stevenson at 26. Like you said, he could be higher as long as the workload keeps coming. I think Damien Harris is I think that he's still good enough to the point where he's going to get goal line carries every once in a while, and that's going to kind of limit Ramondre Stevenson. I think Ramondre Stevenson right now is thriving in like a Chase Edmonds role. He's getting carries, not necessarily all the money carries, but he is getting also targets in the passing game. I think Ramondre Stevenson's doing a better job capitalizing on that volume. He doesn't have as many weapons to contend with, obviously, as Chase Edmonds. They have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle down there, but I think Ramondre Stevenson is the start, definitely over Damien Harris this week and moving forward, unless something would happen to Ramondre.
Yeah, exactly. And if anything would happen to Damien Harris, Ramondre Stevenson would be an RB1 play. Zeke Elliott at 27, Josh Jacobs at 28. Zeke, with him, he's still the primary early down back, right? However, things did get quite close in terms of the rushing attempts between him and Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard was the one with the 100-yard game. He had that big 50-yard run as well, and he's the more explosive back. And if Jerry Jones wasn't their GM, then things would, and the owner, things would be different, right? Tony Pollard would probably be getting more touches than Zeke Elliott at this point, but that's not the case. Zeke, as you saw last week, he's the one who's going to get the first crack at the goal line, so that's why he's at 27. If you're wondering where Tony Pollard is, you're going to have to check out my rankings, Patreon. I'm just kidding. He's at. I have him at 31. I have Pollard at 31, right outside these top 30. After Josh Jacobs, Kareem Hunt, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then I have Tony Pollard at 31. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I have him over Tony Pollard because there's more of a chance that he's being used near the goal line than Tony Pollard, and he's been scoring touchdowns, and that's pretty much it. Pollard, I think Pollard's chance of getting in the end zone is a little bit less than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire's also been being used in the receiving game a little bit. That's why I have him. It doesn't change the fact that I want to sell him right now. But if you have him, I think he's still like, you know, a decent flex play. Is Kareem Hunt too low?
No, I don't think
No?
he's too low because Nick Chubb's just been playing so well that it's hard to say that Kareem Hunt's going to be like, oh, suddenly show up again. And it seems like the Browns passing game has kind of found its footing, you know, where the first week everything was kind of taking time to gel and Kareem Hunt was the easy check down option. And he actually had 2 touchdowns was a Kareem Hunt, right, in week 1. And he's been relatively quiet since, you know, Amari Cooper's kind of come out. And now we have David Njoku putting his hand in and hoping that he can get a higher target share. I think Kareem Hunt's kind of going to fall by the wayside unless anything would happen to them or they just have a bad game. But I think the Browns offense is much better with Jacoby Brissett than a lot of us expected it to be. And if it wasn't as good,
imagine what it's going to be like with Deshaun Watson now, right?
Assuming Deshaun Watson looks like Deshaun Watson.
But, I guess, but would you say that he's better than Jacoby Brissett, even if he's half of what he was?
Yeah, maybe. He's much more dynamic, much more of a talent than Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett kind of reminds me of Cooper Rush, where he's just there. He's literally game management. It just don't make the dumb mistake, and they'll be fine, you know. So,
yeah.
This week we're talking about this week. I'm okay with Kareem Hunt here. I don't think he's too low. Yeah.
And most likely the Browns will be in a positive game script or at least neutral game script against the Falcons.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That screams more Nick Chubb than Kareem Hunt.
Yeah.
And I think that'll do it, man. If you guys, you know, have any questions, if you want to see the full rankings, patreon.com, just search for Upper Hand Fantasy. The link is here in the description, in the YouTube and also in the podcast description as well. So check that out. Hit me up on Instagram as well at Upper Hand Fantasy. That's Upper Hand Zach if you're looking for him on Instagram. And we'll see you guys soon. We'll be back tomorrow with the wide receiver and tight end rankings, and we'll kind of go over, you know, all the updates when it comes to all the injuries this week as well. So we'll see you guys soon. Take it easy. Peace.